about options and methods, how we migrate from WSCS to Windows Update for Business. Let me do this in full screen mode. So we are going to quickly skim over some basics about Windows Update, and then we are going to see some details about the options we have in migrating to Windows Update for Business. For those of you who have not met me, my name is Patty Damodaran. I'm a senior technology specialist focusing on cloud endpoints. So as you all know, Windows Update is a cloud service that helps to deliver Windows updates over the internet for both consumer as well as commercial devices. Windows Server Update Services is an on-prem tool that uses Windows Update in the backend, which syncs the updates from Windows Updates and then helps you in deploying those updates to your endpoints and gives you more control. Windows Update for Business is a more recent service that we released maybe a few years back. And this again uses Windows Update in the backend and gives you more control and options while deploying those Windows updates. The biggest advantage is you don't need any additional infrastructure for using Windows Update for Business. And within Windows Update, you have various classes of updates that we release. Some of them are quality updates, feature update, driver update, and other Microsoft updates other than Windows updates. And the tools that you can use for deploying and managing Windows Update for Business are Intune, Configuration Manager, and Group Policies. And you'll also see that these are the same tools that we'll be using while migrating to Windows Update for Business. And you can see that let's point it out. And you can see with each of these migration paths, again, we are just using the same tools that we discussed in the last slide, which is GPO or Intune or Configuration Manager. And let's talk about each one of them in detail. And there are a few things that you'll have to do irrespective of which method you're going to use for migrating to Windows Update for Business. Some of them are grouping your devices. For example, you'll have to create a separate group for your IT department and a separate group for production devices. Planning and then choosing a branch level, whether you want to use a pre-release branch for an IT department and a current branch version for production, or whether you want to use a current branch for business version for your production devices. And since Windows Update for Business is a cloud service, you'll have to also configure update compliance, which is powered in the cloud. So that you can monitor the status of these updates on the devices that you're deploying. Then you'll also have to configure delivery optimization. This is going to help you in saving and optimizing your network bandwidth when it comes to installing and deploying updates. And we're not going to focus on these two topics for today's session. We can always have a separate session around update compliance and delivery optimization. So today we are just focusing on the options we have while migrating to Windows Update for Business. So let's see the first option, which is Windows. Here in this method, we are assuming that you're using a Windows WSCS in a standalone mode, and you're using group policies to manage it. And we're also assuming that you're moving to Windows Update for Business and continuing to use the group policy. So first off, you'll have to install the latest version of Windows ADMX templates, and that's going to give you a lot of new policies that's available for both Windows Update and Windows Update for Business. We've also provided you with a link where you can download the latest ADMX template. Once you do that, you'll find a new policy which helps you in specifying the source for the update classes. So here you'll be able to choose between Windows Update or WSUS option. When you choose Windows Update, that means you're moving the workload to Windows Update for Business. Since we are discussing about how to migrate to Windows Update for Business, we are choosing all the source as Windows Update. And the next thing is again configuring group policies that are associated with Windows Update and Windows Update for Business. We have also given you the link at the bottom, which will have important policies that are required for managing Windows Update for Business and Windows Update through group policies. And once you do that, you're effectively migrating your updates workload from WSUS into Windows Update for Business through group policies. So that's the first option. The second option is we are assuming that you want to move to Windows Update for Business and use Intune for managing the policies instead of using group policies. Once again, you'll have to install the latest ADMX template so that you get the latest policies, and one of them is the policy where you choose the source. Once you choose the update source, if you have not already configured Intune and auto enrollment, you'll have to complete the configuration for hybrid domain join and auto Intune enrollment. And once you do that, you'll enroll your devices, and we have put the link here giving you more information around these steps. Once you do that, you'll use the Intune portal to configure Windows updates and Windows Update for Business policies through these nodes. So you go into devices, and once you scroll down on this blade, you'll see these policy options, and you'll use them to control the behavior of the updates. As Richard mentioned, last month, Scott presented the options and details around how the settings work within Intune. So you can refer to that video for more details around setting up these policies. And this link over here is also going to help you in understanding a bit deeper around the options available within Intune. So now, the third method, what we are assuming is you're a configuration manager customer, and you want to move to Windows Update for Business instead of using the configuration manager along with WSUS. Here again, you install the latest ADMX template, specify the source, and change all the source to Windows Update. And then you deploy a client policy and turn off the software updates for these clients. And then you go into your software library and go into Windows Update for Business node, and that is where you will configure the different policies for Windows Update for Business. There are a few things that we'll have to keep in mind, which is specific to this option. First one is, since you're moving the workload to Windows Update for Business, the clients are no longer going to scan against WSUS server. So the configuration manager report will not get the accurate data back from WSUS server. So for that reason, again, you'll have to complete the update compliance configuration so that the reports are available on this portal, and you can monitor the installation status and details around compliance. And the next thing to keep in mind is around Microsoft 365 app updates. Configuration Manager uses WSUS in the backend for syncing Microsoft 365 app updates Now, since we moved the workload from WSUS to Windows Update for Business, you'll have to use either group policy or Office Admin Portal for managing Microsoft 365 app updates. And one more thing to call out for Office Admin Portal is this is a new addition under the Microsoft 365 app updates, and you can use this portal for monthly updates rather than using it for other versions of Microsoft 365 app updates. You can use this for the monthly channel release. With that, we are coming to the last option, which is where we assume that you are a configuration manager customer and you have co-management configured in your environment. So with this, again, you install the latest ADMX template, set up the source, and within co-management, you move the workload for Windows Update policy. And once you do that, in the previous case, you'll have to set up the policies for Windows Update for Business and Windows Updates through Intune portal. And once you do this, again, you're effectively transferring the ownership to Windows Update for Business from WSUS. That is all I have today to discuss, and let's open the floor for any questions.
And while we wait for questions, has anyone successfully migrated from either Config Manager or WSUS over to Windows Update for Business? And if so, how's that been?
I would say we haven't. I'm Chris Barth. I'm the manager of desktop engineering at Cornell University. So this is a very timely presentation because we're just in the getting into Intune phase of we have on-prem configuration manager, and we're looking at different ways to get into Intune and co-management, and encryption and Windows Update for Business seem to be the areas that were extremely appealing to us. And so it's some interesting scenarios with the way that we have set. Like we don't have WSUS inside of Config Man. We're running standalone WSUS, but we also have Configuration Manager. Oh. Like I can't explain that in such a short amount of time, but let's just say things are interesting in higher ed for those reasons. But yeah, this is a great presentation that I'm going to share with my team and bring it back when we're discussing our roadmap. So thanks a lot for having us.
Yeah, no problem.
I see someone has raised their hand.
Oh,
sure. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we got you.
Yeah, my name is Laura Daigle. I'm a systems engineer in Virginia Beach Public Schools. We migrated over from running WSUS through Config Manager to Windows Updates for Business through Intune, and it was probably the best decision that we've ever made. So if anyone's questioning, should we do this? Well, in addition to the way updates are handled now for endpoints with cumulative updates, this running through Intune has been a game changer for us. We have a increase in success rate. We have been happy with being able to, I think some of the reports have increased tremendously. I wish there was a little bit more reporting straight within Intune and not necessarily going into Azure, but it's been a game changer for us. We do have a ring structure. We set up 4 different rings one being day of. So I'm expecting my device to get updates here shortly. And then we kind of scattered it out. I will say one of the things that we did do was we set within Intune, we set a device policy that just kind of optimized being able to get those updates. I'm trying to look at it right now, but it was essentially battery power settings and such like that. It was just a recommended settings. But once we did that, it was actually, yeah, that's exactly that. Yeah, yeah, that's the doc we use, and it actually helped to increase tremendously. So I think we set it to like 50% or something like that was one of the power options, maybe a little bit higher. Anyways, we followed that that doc, and that really helped as well. So in conjunction with just the settings as a whole, we did. And one of the things we were a bit we rolled out, and something that we hadn't done before was driver updates. So we always kind of block the driver updates, and that's something that we were trying to. That was one of the holes I think that we had on our endpoints, was getting the drivers updated. So we did change in the settings to allow for driver updates. Now, granted, the first time it really there was a lot of updates, but as the months go by, I think I see like maybe one or two, if any, driver updates from our systems. So
that
was my experience.
Good.
I think overall, I think we've been extremely happy and proud of that, and moving over towards that, because it was definitely but I also I think Microsoft has changed in endpoint update, just it has increased, or the way that you've designed them has definitely helped.
Yeah, having everything be like a cumulative update instead of the individual updates you had to do before Windows 10. When you're doing like Windows 7 updates, and then you had all these different KBs every month, you'd have like 6, 7, 8 different things you might have to install on top of Office, and having its own individual KBs. That was a lot that people had to deal with on the Windows 7 side of things, and even Windows 8. But once we got to Windows 10, making them all cumulative made things a bit easier. But
I will say that that quality deferral, we've played with that. Like, we've adjusted it as we, just to kind of make it make sense in our mind, because of that quality deferral. It kept pushing our updates.
Are you talking about this one, or are you talking about the other node?
No, you were, well, it kind of showed on both of them, but it just allowed, like, when the deadline for the actual quality update to take place, I was talking about the other one, sorry.
Okay.
Right, so just the deferral time period, we have ours 4 days, 7 days, and 14 days, and we broke it up into three different rings from that perspective. It just, because we found that, by the time everything took and, went to effect, our systems, I was like a month and a half before, or the new updates were already coming down before I could even say, yep, we've completed a successful month of patching, right?
Right. Okay. Got it. Yeah. Yeah. The ring deferrals for both quality and feature updates. It's a little interesting depending on the customer. I mean, this is really something that has to be determined by, what you guys are comfortable with, right? Because you're not going to put it at 0 days, because otherwise you're going to get patches that are just come directly on Patch Tuesday. So most will end up putting at 7 days, 14 days. I don't know exactly what the optimizing guide says, but this thing's 44 pages, and I know most people aren't going to go through and read this whole thing, but I do applaud you for actually going through and reading this and actually implementing this, because one of the tough things about this guide is that if you are using Intune, there isn't anything Intune specific in here. All of the recommendations are in what they reference the update CSPs or the group policies, but they don't say, hey, go into Intune and go set this in your update rings. And that's, I think, a big miss on our part. I would rather us have actually put the explicit guidance in Intune for what to put in there. And so what I ended up doing is I actually wrote up a spreadsheet that went through this whole entire doc and added in like all of the different things that you would want to set in Intune and where you'd have to go and set that stuff up. Because what you mentioned about the rings is one thing, but then you also were talking about the power settings and how you had to change power settings as well for battery life and things like that. And that's not in your update rings. And so a lot of people actually miss that stuff, but we do call out power and some other things in here as well. So this guide's really good, but it's 44 pages long. It's like a book. And so it's difficult, I think, for a lot of people to consume this or even be aware that this thing even exists. It's actually hard to find it. The way you find it is there's this download you can go to called Windows 10 Update Baseline. If you just do a search for this, this will take you to a download. You download this file, and inside of it, there's a baseline. This is actually for group policy. There's like I think a PowerShell script or something in here. But this update baseline is just for GPO. There's nothing to do with Intune. But this right here, this is where I got this PDF from. And so this has all of that. So I mean, this is a hidden doc that a lot of people don't know that it's even out there.
Hey, Richard.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
I just dropped a link in the chat to that document.
Cool, thanks.
On the blog post. So there's a blog post and then there's a link to it. And then it looks like they may want your spreadsheet. So
yeah, I'll share that in the team. I'll go ahead and put it there so everyone's got a copy of it. One thing that I've done also here in my tenant is based on the settings in that optimizing guide, I set the settings up effectively what the settings are for my update ring, which admittedly is not a lot. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can turn on and off here, but most of the stuff that are on and off is pretty much the defaults. However, one thing that this document talks about, and I've actually had this conversation last week with my team, was there's this concept that you may have heard us talk about, not us like my team, but you may have heard or seen like blog posts, or maybe if you watch any like Ignite videos or any like conferences or things like that, there's this concept of this thing called intelligent active hours. And Scott, I'm basically going to repeat what I said on Friday, but in Intune, when you set up your deployment rings, like the most important thing is the automatic update behavior. I mean, the other stuff's important too, but the automatic update behavior is important because this is how Windows is going to determine how it's going to install something. And most of the stuff in here is auto install at or auto install and restart at some time. So whether that's maintenance time, whether that's a scheduled time, whether that's an auto install and reboot without end user control. Now, before the pandemic, what most K-12 schools were set to, at least most K-12 schools that we had worked with closely that had shared card environments, is that they would be set to one of two things. They'd either be set to auto install and reboot without end user control. And what this would do is the devices would install their updates around midnight. The devices would wake up, they would install updates around midnight, and then they'd fall back asleep. And the students would come grab the devices from the carts, turn them on, use the devices like normal. They would never see any reboot prompts. They would never see anything. Like everything should be as if like the student just put the device away the previous day, took it out the following day. Nothing would have changed. Everything would have been just as they would expect. But the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, a lot of devices were going home with students. So devices were just being taken out of carts and given to a student who would take it home with them. And now that device, you have no idea when that device is actually being used. That device, and you have no idea when that device can be plugged into power. And that was actually the most important thing. And so what we noticed looking at telemetry for education customers, that we found that update compliance was actually reduced significantly when the pandemic hit, because devices weren't powered on when we'd expect them to be. Because if you go back to the scenario that I gave earlier before the pandemic, is that these devices would update around midnight. They'd wake up and install updates at midnight, and then they fall back asleep. But with students, you have no idea if they're plugging the device in at the end of the day. You'd hope so. If it's like someone's cell phone or whatever, they'd plug everything at the end of the day and it'd be charged, but you don't know that. And so what we were finding is that a lot of education customers had this set, but they also had auto install and restart at maintenance time. And what this does is it leverages active hours. And most customers would set something like this because they would say during the school day, we don't want any updates to install at all. So we're set from 8 to 5 p.m. or it could even be longer than that. It could be like 8 to 8 p.m. or something like that. And so we don't want anything to install during this time frame because this is active. Students cannot be interrupted while they're doing school. But we're okay with it updating and installing outside of that time. And so what would happen is that once active hours ended, there's a scheduled task in Windows that would run, and it would run about an hour to an hour and a half after active hours ends. So that's about 9 to 9:30. So at around 9 to 9:30, the device would wake up. There's a wake timer that would kick off, wake the device up, and then install updates. But the device has to be plugged in at that time to power in order for it to actually do that. If it's not, then we skip the installation of updates at that time. So if your school had set the devices to maybe not 8 p.m., but maybe it was 5 p.m., or maybe it was even earlier than that, maybe it was like 3 p.m., because the school day ends around 3 or 4 o'clock. If you set your devices for that, students go to extracurricular activities, they go do other things. Their device is probably not plugged in that close to the end of the school day. And so updates can't install, or they won't install. And so again, going back to the telemetry that we were looking at for education customers throughout the pandemic, we found that update compliance numbers were they were cratering. Like you'd see like 20 or 25% patch rates because these policies weren't set correctly. And so this is my roundabout way of talking about what this intelligent active hours thing is. So what intelligent active hours does is it figures out based on how you use your device when to set active hours. So now that the pandemic's not over, we still have variants and all that kind of stuff, but we're now in a much different world where devices are going home with students, and a lot of schools have moved to one-to-one. The shared cart model still exists, but it's not as prevalent as it was before. And even in higher ed, you still have users you have faculty members, staff members that are taking devices home with them. They were doing that before the pandemic, but they're still going to continue to do that. And so when these devices are going home, we need a better way of installing updates that aren't going to impact when that user might be using that device, because they still could be using that device at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night. They could be doing homework. They could be doing something, prepping for the next day. So you don't know exactly when a good time to install updates are. In fact, there's probably never a good time to install updates in a hybrid or a remote work world. So what this intelligent active hours does is it's our best guess at determining when the end user actually uses the machine. And so in Windows 11 and Windows 10, you can see this. But if you go into Windows Update, go to active hours, you'll see here that says my active hours are currently 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's a pretty long day, but it's for the most part fairly active. I don't know that I'm here till 8 p.m. all the time, but it's pretty accurate for the most part. I think this is buffering maybe an hour ahead and an hour behind. So I'm definitely not here at 6 a.m. all the time. So it's putting some buffer in here. But this basically says that, hey, during this time, I'm not going to install anything. And so this is calculating this without me setting anything up. I'm not manually setting this at all. And so we leverage that to determine intelligent active hours. But how does Intune determine that? Because when you look at these options, there's nothing here that says intelligent active hours. Well, if you set it to reset to default, that option right there will set intelligent active hours. And we don't mention reset to default in here, but we mention what the auto updates number should be. If you're doing this through like group policy, or if you're doing this like manually setting like registry values or whatnot, we'll actually set that. But in Intune, that intelligent active hours is reset to default. And so when you set that, that's going to leverage the intelligent active hours. And so now devices will update whenever is a good moment for that end user. Now, keep in mind, though, this should not be something that you set for every device in your organization, right? So if you've got shared carts, or if you've got shared labs and kiosks, you want different rings for the different device types or the device usage profiles that you have in your organization. And so for those kinds of devices, that's where you would want to use the auto install options, where you auto install and restart at a scheduled time. So if you've got a lab, for instance, in that lab, you're like, okay, we know that the time that these devices are least used is probably like Saturday or maybe Sunday morning at like 3 a.m. So that's a good time for us to update our lab machines. For our shared cart devices, auto install and reboot without end user control is fine. This will use, you can either do that or you could do something like restart at maintenance, auto install and restart at maintenance time. Set the active hours to be something like late, like maybe 10 p.m. or something like that. That way the device it should have enough power after it's been plugged into the cart, and then it can wake up and install its updates as it needs to. But update ring strategies are going to be important too. And I know Scott talked a bit about that in his presentation back in June. But yeah, so very important to, in this new hybrid work world, to understand the intelligent active hours. And when we did that with some customers, so to kind of close the loop on that, when we worked with customers and had them set this to reset to default, we saw that their compliance numbers went from like 20% back up to like 80 to 90%. In fact, we had some customers that had already done this without us talking to them. And once we noticed this, we reached out to a few different ones and said, hey, what's your update compliance look like? And they were saying, oh yeah, we're up like 90%. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. How did you keep it that high, given the pandemic and the devices going home with people? And they would say, oh, well, we found this guide, and we went and we set the policies. We read through it and we set the policies according to what you guys recommended there, and we got our patching back up to what it was before, because we had poor patch compliance, and we saw it, but we were proactive. Once we saw that, we went through and actually made some changes to our update rings, and we got to a much higher compliance number. So there's that. Questions? Okay, John wants the spreadsheet. Yeah, maintenance time was defaults to midnight local time. That could be changed if you want. Also, it runs other Windows tasks as well. Yep. Cool. All right. Any other questions? Tim, will you be sharing that spreadsheet?
Yeah, Richard, a little bit higher up. Someone was asking about being able to deploy, or Mike Kelly was asking to deploy drivers through WinPE using the FFU method.
Struggling to get it to load. Okay, FFU. So Mike, I don't know if you want to call off mute. We can just kind of answer that question. So you guys are kind of going back and forth. So we got to read this whole thing. Okay, is there a way to install drivers that way in WinPE? So Mike, are you having an issue where you can't detect the hard drive? Mike still there? Oh, it looks like Mike dropped. Yeah, I don't see anyone. Okay. Yeah, I've got a feeling that he probably can't. He might not be able to boot off of PE because his storage driver is probably not there. So he can import in the PE version for the FFUs that we give. He can just import the storage drivers if he needs them. But okay. And yeah, John and Tim, I'll share the spreadsheet. I got to clean it up a bit, but I'll share it into the team channel, like I said earlier. All right. Well, we've got just a few minutes left. And yeah, Laura, thanks again for sharing. Your feedback's great. It's always good to hear from a customer that's done the stuff that we actually recommend when they actually do it, and then they have a good experience. It's always good to hear about that. So thanks a lot.
Richard, further up, John Coulter was asking if there was any cool swag available for the members on this call.
That's a great question. I'm not the president of the swag committee, So I actually don't know. I'm not sure if we got any swag or not.
It would be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be, well, I think Ryan has volunteered himself to go and figure out if we can get swag for the community. So
Get a bunch of green jackets for everyone.
what is this, the Masters?
Yeah, exactly. Members only jackets.
Well, you are in Atlanta or in Georgia, so
That's right. Got Augusta down the street.
yeah, so you can go get us all some green jackets and we can raffle them off. Yeah, right. Get our guys to start showing some love for men. That's for sure. Could definitely use some of that. All right, guys. Well, we got a few minutes. I don't have anything else left. If there's no questions, we can wrap a bit early. I'll get that spreadsheet cleaned up and I'll post it into the chat.
Richard, one thing, just to the Scott.
Yeah.
If you hadn't seen the announcement around Microsoft Ignite, put a link in there to it. It may have been out last time we had the meeting, but that is an in-person event. It's going to be in October in Seattle. So just know that you can sign up, but they'll also have a hybrid experience too. So it'll have all the sessions. There's a lot of cool. That's when a lot of the new product announcements are made. So block out time on your calendar that week to attend sessions online, and they are recorded, so you can go back and look at the sessions later as well. I just drop the link in there, and you can got some budget and want to go, or just go on your own, sign up. They'll, or at least get the notification to when to go sign up back up, or when registration opens up for in person. I think it is going to be limited in the sense that, it's not going to be like 15,000 like at the last one. But they should have sufficient enough. I think it'll go quickly just because it's, we haven't had one in almost 3 years. So
Yeah.
sure you pay attention to that if that's something you want to do.
Yep. Ignite's always a good time. It's always, and that's the time when, like Scott said, we get a lot of the product announcements, and oftentimes that's when we find out about things too, like when there's new releases of stuff and new features. So that's an opportunity for us, here internally to keep up with what's coming with things around Microsoft Endpoint Manager and everything else that kind of goes along with it. So yeah, definitely sign up just for the remote stuff if you can't go in person.
Last question I saw was from Sam Daniel asking about more information about AutoPatch. I responded that AutoPatch is not supported for EDU or A subscription licenses.
All right. Yeah. Yep. No AutoPatch. That's why we're here. So we can help you actually set up your rigs the right way. But yeah, there's no AutoPatch in education, at least not yet. We'll see if that changes. Cool. All right, guys. Well, have a good rest of your week. And as always, we'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Yep.
Take it easy,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.